Frontline with Kortney Kenny, and I'm Tom Parisi, and today we got a great set of guests. It's good to be back for another special episode of the Frontline podcast. I'm Tom Parisi with Kortney Kenny, and we are joined today by some astute scouting, the gurus, if you will, of the North Bay Battalion. John Winstanley joins us again. Charles Abbott making his first appearance on the podcast, and I wanted to start things off. John, I got to ask you, if you ever go on to win a Stanley Cup, you know your name is going to be the most photographed and talked about thing if it ever gets engraved on that. I wonder if you've thought of that too.
Yeah, actually, in my playing days, pretty much everywhere I played, aside from minor hockey, when there was media coverage, it used to be the first question I get from everybody in the media. Even had people ask me if I changed it. If it was like something my parents did when I was younger and I was a pretty good player, if they changed my last name. But it's funny. I deal with a lot of young kids in my full-time job, and I get a lot of kids who call me Mr. Winstanley Cup and stuff like that. So it's pretty funny.
Hey, that's half the fun. So, gentlemen, let's talk about the draft that was. We recapped a little bit with our U18 priorities, with the normal draft going on about a couple weeks ago at this point of the recording, and then soon by the U18. And even if we can, maybe we can jump into the import draft at the end. But Charles, I want to get your take.
Sure.
Since I want to talk about the big leaps it seems the scouting department has made in just a short little while. Can you take us through, what changed and how did you know it was time to make that decision?
Oh, well, which decision do you mean?
Well, just how to approach the draft maybe a little bit differently.
Well, I mean, this draft was a different animal entirely. The viewings were a little sparse. We had to kind of fall back on a lot of video, even connections. Talking to other agents, talking to other coaches, and even guys that Johnny and Adam had played with in the past. So we fell back on a lot of that, and it was a lot of late nights watching hockey on some not great cameras, set up in rinks and things like that. So, as opposed to how different that was from the regular year, I mean, it's leaps and bounds. I remember, one story I've kind of got burned in my mind is we, all three of us, we drove to, this barn in the middle of nowhere in Caledon. And it was basically a hockey fight club. It was a 10 by 10 yard little ice pad that this guy had set up, and there were 4 players in there, and they were basically just doing small area drills and killing each other. And funnily enough, actually we ended up drafting one of those guys, and 3 of the others are in our division now. So it was an interesting year this year for sure.
So how did you guys figure this all out? Like, I mean, the video, like you said, we've seen as much as we could, Kortney and I. It's grainy. It's shot by probably their parents and sent to you guys. I mean, how do you know what's legitimate and what isn't?
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, we'll find out in 3 years, right? I guess.
Yeah.
It's mostly, it's a lot of conversation, and that's really what it is at the end of the day. I mean, the last person I talked to was either Adam or Johnny at night, and the first person I talked to when I woke up was either Adam or Johnny. And it's really what it was. It was a ton of conversation, and after the draft, I think we took a week off. We didn't speak to each other for a week. I don't think it was on purpose, but it just kind of happened that way. I guess we were sick of each other's voices, but that's how it worked out. And but it was a team effort, though. I mean, there's a team on the ice and there's a team off the ice, and I think we've got some pretty good camaraderie, and it's working well.
John, I asked Adam this question the day of the second round, and I'll ask this to you, but can you just speak to your experience in the GTA and everything, and how many kids were taken from the GTA, especially by the battalion, how much easier in a season that was or wasn't, because of COVID, how easy, or if it made your job any easier knowing a lot of these kids?
Well, I wouldn't say it's easier, but I mean, it definitely does help. And knowing the coaches in the area and having a lot of good relationships with with a lot of guys that, you know, I put a lot of trust in this area that I know are really quality coaches and quality people. I know that they've had some of these kids for not 1 year, but 3, 4, 5 years, some of them. So I know that they've had good coaching development. I know that they haven't been spoon-fed anything. They've had to work through adversity. That was a big benefit in knowing some of those kids. In terms of our second and third round pick, you know, there's nobody in the OHL more familiar with Nicholas Sima and Anthony Romani than myself. Nicholas Sima has played for me probably close to 20 times over the last 3 seasons. He was one of my number 1 call-ups from our 05 team. He fit in very well with my club, my 04 club. And Anthony Romani, going back 5 years now, probably played for me about 18 or 20 times as well, including winning an OHF championship with my group a couple years ago. Both high character kids, both work ethic is off the charts, and really want to come into our program and win. That's what they've come here for. So, you know, having the connections, knowing the kids, definitely helpful. But there's a lot of growth that happens in that year. It's like a kid like Nicholas Sima in his Bantam year, he probably played at 5'9.5", 5'10", and he's probably 6'3" now.
Wow.
You know, that's a big jump, and you know, that's a lot for a kid to grow and fit into his body and all of those kind of things. But I don't know if you guys have had a chance to speak to that young man yet, but I think you will be blown away once you have a conversation with him.
Well, I know we're definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, and that's kind of leads to my next question for the both of you. How tough is it to kind of project where these, like in any draft year, where these kids are going to be in 2 or 3 years? I mean, when I keep bringing them up whenever I talk about it, but we had Dallin Wakely on, and he said he's grown a lot since his draft, you know, and everything like that. Like, so how tough is it to project those guys?
Go ahead, Charlie.
Sure, it's a very complicated process of polishing your crystal ball and gazing deeply into it. I mean, you do. It's a guessing game at the end of the day, right? But you know, you hopefully you're making more educated guesses than wrong ones. So I think it's you bring together 5 different key attributes to try and predict future success. And I think of those 5, or the 5 being, you know, like Johnny said, work ethic, character. I think you add to that hockey IQ, puck skills, and skating. I think the 3 that you absolutely have to have are work ethic, character, and hockey IQ. The others you can build. The first 3 are a lot tougher to build. I think they're, you know, a little bit more ingrained. You either have them or you don't. But if you're looking at those key attributes and you're taking them all into account, I think you can. It's a pretty good predictor of future success if you have those first 3.
Yeah, for me, guys, it's similar to what Charlie just said. If we're going to bring guys into North Bay, into the city, and into our culture as a team, we want to make sure that the least of our worries are going to be off the ice, and that's what we put a big premium on, is kids with high character, kids with you know, big appetites. And I think we talked about this the last time that I was on your podcast, was, you know, we want kids that can't wait to get to the rink. And being heavily involved in minor hockey, you know, there's kids that mom and dad dropped them off at the rink, and there's kids who cannot wait to get to the rink. And there's kids that if you allowed them, they would stay on the ice as much as possible. And I think the more of those kids that we can find and put in the hands of our coaching staff, which we're extremely excited about, I mean, that's all we can do at this point. And after that, as Charlie said, it does become a little bit of a guessing game. But if you put the work in and get those intangibles in those players, then hopefully we have good success with them.
Absolutely.
Charlie, I wanted to ask you,
Sure.
That culture change when it comes to, you know, looking for guys with character, you know, that being front and foremost. When and how did that decision come about?
Oh, well, I think it's always been an important thing. I think it was just a case of underlining it and really making it a priority, as opposed to part of the recipe. I think it's been bolded and underlined, and that's maybe the main difference. I don't know if I can pinpoint exactly when it was, but yeah, it's definitely something that we're going to emphasize more, and we have been.
Well, it just seems over the last couple of years, and I know Kortney and I have talked to a few of them so far. I mean, they're just upstanding gentlemen. I'll go ahead and say it. They're only like 15-year-old kids, but they're well-spoken. You know, they're respectful. And they're, like you said, like Ty Nelson would probably drop what he's doing right now, probably visiting his grandma or something, and go jump on the ice. And I can appreciate that kind of stuff. So it's good to see that coming to the front with the kids nowadays, and it's good to see it consistently. John, I did want to ask you too, how tough is it to weed out some of maybe the coaches trying to, you know, nudge you in the right direction to take their kid just based on, you know, what they know instead of what you know?
Yeah, you know, listen, I've been on that side where you're calling scouts and agents and GMs and, you know, talking about guys. It's something that goes on a lot, and I give them a lot of credit for trying to get their players drafted and you know, get a ticket to the show. But you can kind of read through it sometimes in the way that they're overselling certain people. But you know, I give them a lot of credit because all they want is the best for the kids on their team that they've had, and give them every opportunity. So I do give them credit for that, because my phone in the draft did not stop all day long. Like every second round, it was like, here's 5 guys on my team you should be looking at by like 6 different coaches. So.
And you took your own guys. So, you know,
we took guys we were familiar with for sure. I mean, in a year like this, as Charlie mentioned, you know, if it was a 50-50 decision and we knew a player and knew the family and had interviews with the kid, that's the way we went 9 times out of 10.
Having the pair of you on, I'll ask. I'll first start with Charlie, and then John, if you want to jump in after this. But say you come up and you're all like a 50-50 or something like that. How do you one guy really likes this guy, the other guy really likes this guy, and maybe Adam really likes so and so, and you know, there's a bunch of questions on you have a bunch of players at your disposal right now. What do you kind of say to get your point across as to why you should take that player?
Oh, I think there were numerous times where that came up. I think it kind of came down to, again, those 5 attributes, and kind of, if you picture it as a star, like what it would look like in a graph. You know, if a player is deficient in this area and he's proficient in another one. A lot of times it came down to need too. You know, looking at our team, what are we going to need in a year or two? You know, and things like that. Like the last few years, we had players that maybe weren't the biggest players. I mean, it's not the size of the dog in the fight; it's the size of fighting the dog. But I think this year we were able to take players that were pretty big, sacrificing nothing on the skill front or the ability front. It just kind of worked out that way. But yeah, I mean, it got pretty heated sometimes. You know, what happens in the room stays in the room. I think I'll end up saying that. But we would canvas. You know, we if Adam and I didn't agree on something, it would be, Johnny, what do you think? And if Johnny and I didn't agree on something, or Adam and Johnny didn't agree on something, it'd be like, Charlie, what do you think? And then oftentimes, actually, the real tiebreaker in some cases was, Ryan Houlihan, head coach. What do you think? So it was a team effort. It really was.
Yeah, just to jump in there, the interesting thing about a draft, and maybe more so even this year, was we probably had those arguments 5 months leading up to draft day. And they would happen probably 3 or 4 days a week. And it would be, I really like this guy because we couldn't see them as frequent and as often as we normally would. You do a deep dive on certain players or a certain team, and you leave that dive saying, I love this guy. He's great.
Yeah.
But the other person hasn't done that same dive, so then they come at it with a different perspective. And Charlie's bang on. The ability for us to throw players to Coach Ryan and even Scott Ray at times, he knows some kids at that age. We were throwing him some clips to say, hey, what do you think about this defenseman, or what do you think about this player? We found that the day before the draft, when we had our last meeting to kind of finalize where our list was and where we wanted to attack, we almost sat there and said, well, I guess we've already had all of our fights, so this is pretty easy, which is kind of comical at that point, because we had done so much work leading up to it that we honestly just sat there and said, yeah, well, I agree with that. We've already had that fight. We already established that. So it went pretty seamless.
Safe to say at least nobody was pulling their hair out during the fighting.
We couldn't
Only
even if
Adam,
we
maybe.
tried. So yeah.
Hey, he still looks fantastic, and I'm just a little bit jealous. But
Oh, that's a lie. You came in here saying you were happy not to have any anymore, so don't even.
well, no, I should have done it a long time ago, is what I'm saying. I shouldn't have waited for a pandemic. I wanted to ask you guys, how much harder is it when you're drafting for character? How much harder is it to kind of get a read on the kids when you guys are sitting down with them instead of basing it more or less on skill? How much harder is it for you guys to attack it from that angle?
Well, for me, those interviews, and we talked about this the last time Adam and I were on there, were so invaluable. The ability to get to know the kids, the ability to show our program and show what we're doing here was so invaluable. At times, I work in education. At times, I kind of felt like I was the principal or vice principal, and you get the kid who's in there, and you're not sure that they're telling you the whole story that happened. So, if Adam's the one asking questions, Charles and I had a chance to sit back and kind of see how the kid was reacting to the questions. As I'm sure you guys can appreciate and imagine, you get some 15-year-olds that step in there and they sound like they're 25 years old, like they could be doing your taxes. Like, it's amazing, some of these kids. And then you get the other 15-year-old kid who's reserved and quiet and kind of looks towards mom and dad of what should I say or what shouldn't I say. So I think it was very helpful in those. And I think when we finished, I don't know the exact number, but I think we were about 77 interviews, and they're all between 45 minutes and an hour and 15 minutes each.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we felt we did our work.
Sounds like it.
How early does that like, I know you mentioned, having some of these arguments, months ago, but how early did those interviews, the interview process start?
I think
I think we started in January, maybe.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think it was late December or January.
Yeah.
Is there like a deadline you guys can only start that at, or can you do that kind of as much as you feel?
Yeah, no, we can do it as much as we feel. The only
Okay.
the only new rule this year that the league put in was because it was virtual, one parent had to be present, which is a quality rule anyways, and it was helpful for us to make sure that the parents didn't hear a secondhand story of how the conversation went as well.
Have you ever had parents kind of hijack the interviews?
Of course, of
Well,
course,
there were a couple times. Yeah.
of course.
How
Yeah,
do those usually go?
well, you get sometimes where you can see that they're writing something and then they slide it in front of them.
Yeah.
But again, you get in those situations and the kids get nervous and mom and dads are just trying to help them. So, I give them all the credit, but it was funny at times to see them. You could see on the screen them sliding it across.
That literally reminds me of my favorite Scott Abbott story. Was when we were doing the longest game in battalion history. He was sitting up in the booth with me in Kingston while I was calling the game, and he was sliding Post-it notes over to me like it was school, and with little notes and little stats. And I loved it. I loved having a stats guy for a change. But that reminds me of it.
Yeah.
Well, there's no one better to be your stat guy at that point, right? So
It's true. I got some quality
he's
stuff.
a walking encyclopedia of hockey. Yeah, I mean, he'll tell you down to the game, the game in the series, the day of the week it was, and everything. It's unbelievable.
Well, I would hope so. One of the creators of Trivial Pursuit, I would hope so, right? So
yeah, that's true.
So coming out of the draft, there's the headliners, of course, but if you guys could pick a couple of guys from the later rounds, who are you excited about?
Go ahead, Charlie.
And the easy answer is everyone, but
Well, I'm wondering, do we get any steals?
This year is tougher than most, just because so few games were played, right? So it's a little more difficult for the later guys. But I don't know. I think I'm excited for Chase McQueen Spence. I really liked him. I think he's got a lot of skill and he's got a lot of IQ. Might need to add on to the size and the strength aspect, but I'm excited for him, I think.
For me, and it's funny, as a player, I was probably the least defensive player in the world, but it became comical every time we did a mock draft or talk. I'm always talking about the D for some reason. But again, to be able to get Tate Landry, McKenzie, and Wyatt Kennedy, like, these guys are all 6'4". They are all extremely mobile. They all have good puck skills and good hockey IQ. So when we looked at that to be able to add to our lineup as we move forward. It's pretty exciting to look at our back end and where it's kind of heading right now.
Gentlemen, agree or disagree? It's harder to draft kids now because they're all pretty damn good at hockey.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get the sense for some people that might not have known or of course aren't following as much as you guys are leading up to the draft. We see a lot of reports of how, and even Adam talked about it the day of the draft, that he didn't think someone like Owen Outwater or a bunch of guys were going to fall to you. But somebody, he's the first overall, or not first overall, but first round pick. I just wanted to get your individual scouting reports on Owen before we eventually talk to him and get a sense for ourselves. Just, yeah, because I mean, not everybody has at their disposal the information that you guys had for the last year as well.
Yeah, so for me, I can echo Adam's words. I think we were pretty shocked when he fell to us. And this draft, more than any, usually the week before you start to figure things out. This draft up until the day before, hours before, things were changing. Yeah. So we had some people that we wanted in an order, and we assumed he'd be gone between that 4 and 6 range. This is a 6'3", highly skilled, high compete, good feet, high character kid, comes from a military family. He's moved away from home from Ottawa to Oakville to play in the program that he was in. The coach in Oakville is a guy who's put quite a few kids onto the next level. So, his development is there. You never want to put any expectations on a kid or anything like that. But if you can envision kind of a little bit better skating Rick Nash is how I could kind of give you a good description of the type of player he would be.
I'll take it.
I like Rick Nash. All right.
And your sense on him, Charlie?
Well, I don't know if I can add much more than that. I mean, Johnny said it all, really. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the military thing too, Johnny. I think it's a perfect match, really. I mean, he was a guy that we coveted, and yeah, we were delighted that he was there when we picked. That's really just, I know that's the cliche answer, but it's true. It really is.
Charlie, when you get something like this happen, where a kid falls to you, you didn't even think you would, do you just throw the playbook out after and hope for the best, or do you guys kind of plan out scenarios where, okay, if they take him, who are we going to take? How deep do you guys go into that?
For sure. I'm not sure how many mock drafts did we do, Johnny? Like 8, 9, 10, something like that.
I think we're at 12 this year.
12. Okay. We forecasted for everything. We like to be prepared. Over prepare and or what's the saying? Hope for the best and prepare for the worst. I mean, that's what we did, right? So, yeah, pretty much every scenario we tried to cover. There were still a few that threw curveballs at us, but yeah, that was really, yeah, we tried to imagine every single possibility, and one of the good ones was if Outwater was there, and it was.
I know when we talked to you or previously, John, when we asked about, Wakely falling to you a year ago, you said you were busy on the phone trying to figure out everything you could. Was that kind of the same sense this time around with Outwater? You guys were, trying to figure out all that you could just because you didn't think he was going to be there? Not
so much this year, because it was one of those things where the teams in front of us in a normal year, you start to figure out who they're going to take. And, that's up a week before they kind of have already locked into who they want. This year, there really wasn't enough time to do that. We found out that there is probably a 70% chance he might fall to us at 4:30 on Friday. So we were sitting in the room and we already had a plan. We had a plan in place for what we thought was going to occur. And when we found that out, we threw up the videos again and started doing another deep dive. And we had all of his games up there, as well as the other people we were looking at, and to make sure that if it did come to fruition, we were ready to do what was best.
When it obviously the pandemic hasn't been fun for many people, and I've asked this question of Adam I think on day 2 of the draft, but just how good did it feel to get into the building, into Memorial Gardens, and talk hockey and talk draft with your fellow scouts and team staff? Well,
for me, it was probably the most exciting because I've been on board for a little over a year now, and my views of that building so far have been in the dressing room, in the coach's office, in the gym upstairs, and that's it. I haven't been able to go anywhere else in the building based on protocols that were in place. So this was the first opportunity that I got to meet more of the office staff, be in the scouts room, walk around the building a little bit to get a feel for the atmosphere. I'm also one of the only guys on the coaching staff, aside from Billy and Razor, that played in North Bay when I was in Sudbury. They were still in the league, so it was cool to kind of see the building and the changes that were made. And then obviously talking hockey over 3 days is there's nothing better than that. So absolutely.
For me, it was great. It was just such a breath of fresh air, and I love draft day at the best of times. It's like Christmas and your birthday wrapped up into one. So, and not only that, it was spread over 2 days, so you're getting even more of it. But yes, after that long break and everything, it was just, again, it's cliche, but words really can't describe how good it felt to get back into that rink and actually be talking about hockey and just getting back to work. It was fantastic.
I'm sure the kids were kind of anxious, with it being 2 days, but did you guys prefer the 2-day format as opposed to one?
I think there were advantages to it. You tackle the first 3 rounds, and then you're able to kind of circle the wagons, and then you assess how those first 3 rounds went, and then you're able to focus on what you're going to do on day 2. I don't know if they're going to continue that moving forward, but this year we took advantage of it, and we just did the best we could with what we were given.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it. I like it. I think even the ability after round 3 to totally reassess your list, and maybe it was more this year, and maybe next year won't be so similar. But we still had guys available who we had very high on our lists after day 1, and it was like, okay, let's reassess here where we want to go. This is what we've already got in the cupboard. This is our lineup, and now let's start making some decisions for day 2. So I was also a big fan of it.
All right, moving on. One of the last topics that we'll probably cover here is the U18 draft that happened a couple of days after that fact. You guys making 2 picks in the 3-round process because you didn't take a goalie, which is, you look pretty set in that position anyways right now. So if you guys can take us through your 2 picks that you made on the U18 day.
Yeah, so pick 1 is Carson Ricci, and he's a guy who joined my junior Canadian team last year in December. Played for the Toronto Red Wings prior to joining me. Good left-handed shot defenseman. He's grown about 3 inches this year. Very physical. He loves those big open ice hits. The majority of last year, he was a B-rated prospect, which is generally a 6th through 10th round pick. He didn't get selected. I think it was mainly because he came to my club, which was very strong, and he, in terms of depth, was a little bit lower. But has put in a lot of work even during the pandemic. I've had the ability to watch him pretty closely develop here, and high character kid, and somebody that we wanted to bring in and bring him into the fold. Charlie, I don't know if you want to touch on the second pick, or I can do that as well.
Well, you did such a good job on the first one. I think it'd be a mistake if I stepped in now.
Listen, it's one of those things. Again, it comes back down to familiarity, right? Adam had a really good look at the player and was very comfortable in terms of selecting him in that round and having him come into our program. And it's another kid who's developed quite a bit in the last year, and that's what has been lost during this pandemic is the kids who have really taken advantage of the time off. It's amazing. And I'm sure you guys have seen, the videos or the posts of Ty. Ty was at my place playing road hockey with my kids a couple weeks ago. Like, he looks like a totally different person. Like he is now, he's a grown up. Like he's ready to go. There's a kid who took full advantage, and I've had the privilege of seeing a bunch of the other guys, Curry and Arnsby and the Twins. I've had the privilege of seeing all these kids. They are much stronger and much better shape and ready to jump in the lineup.
Well,
right,
we're pretty excited for October 7th. Yeah.
I keep expecting him to announce a fight with Jake Paul or something.
I saw Ty on the OHL website talking with them, and I was like, that's not the same kid we talked to a year ago. Holy jumping. Like, he looks like He looks like a Ken doll, chiseled jaw, and he's ready to go. So I can't wait to see him on the ice. Charlie, I wanted to get your thoughts on the U18 draft as a whole. It's been around since 2017, and people I don't think give it as much credit or stock as they should. I mean, clearly, it's a valuable piece of drafting information to have.
Sure. It's an opportunity to add talent and skill and size to your organization. I don't think it's anything to scoff at or shake your finger at. Some people might forget, like we got Nick Paul, as an 18-year-old, and there's late bloomers. They're allowed to play, and they can be an impact they can make an impact on your team. So yeah, I think it's a valuable thing.
Yeah, I would add to that, in a year like we just finished, I think the importance of the U18 draft come 2022
Absolutely
is going to be massive, because once draft day kind of ends, you start to get the phone calls about, hey, this guy never got picked, and you're like, ooh, that guy's a pretty good player. This guy never got picked. So you're thinking, okay, next year there's going to be that much more importance on that draft in those players for sure.
Well, Nick Paul. Sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
Well, I was just going to say, if you look at the World Championship, I mean, another guy that might have been in the U18 is a guy like Andrew Mangiapane, who terrorized us when he played for Barrie for all those years. So
yeah, we don't like him.
It's a valuable piece. I mean, it's nothing to scoff at all whatsoever. So if anybody is doing that, then they should take a better look at it.
Well, the kids have something to look up to. I mean, Nick Paul only goes on to score the gold medal winning goal. So
no big deal.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Assistant captain of the Ottawa Senators, whatever.
Yep.
Traded for Jason Spezza. It is what it is. Toronto Maple Leafs legend Jason Spezza, I might add. Even though heartbreaking, I'm not going to get into that right now. But anyways, coming up, the last thing I have to add to this, but coming up, we have the import draft, and feasibly there's one slot because Petrov is still around. Just how are you guys looking forward to the import draft coming up here shortly?
Well, the import draft is another unique experience. Obviously, you don't have a chance to see the players. So it's a lot of video, a lot of speaking to agents. There's a lot of trust put in people that you're speaking to. And then we just look at our need. Is it a forward? Is it a D? Is it a goalie? Which way do we want to go? And then you just assess what your team needs and how that player would fit into the club. If there's a language barrier, what are we doing academically? Do we want to get them ESL lessons right off the bat? If we draft them June 30th, we want them to start ESL lessons right away at home. You start to plan out that part of their arrival and development as well. But in terms of the draft itself, it's very much a wait and see, and you'll have between 3 and 5 players in your holster, and you just kind of cross your fingers and hope for the best.
Yeah, we're picking a little further down on the list this year than we were last year, so yeah, there's gonna be a little bit of finger crossing going on.
Yeah,
I just have a good feeling about it. I mean, a lot of kids or a lot of teams are maybe holding on to their picks, so maybe 30th overall is a good thing this year. Maybe that turns into 17, 18 overall. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, gentlemen, we really appreciate the time today to go through the draft and the upcoming CHL draft a little bit. And thanks so much for the time and the laughs and poking fun and all that other stuff. We really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, that was Charlie Abbott, and that was John Winstanley, and this meeting for the Hair Club for Men is officially over. We had a good run. We had some fun laughs. We had some good talks, and they're invited back anytime. I think John's going to be starting to get into creeping up into territory of friend of the show. I think next time he's on, we'll have to call him that. But if you're watching, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think him and Adam might have to duke it out.
Some kind of shootout duo. I'd pay to watch that.
Yeah, but and whoever wins gets to be friend of the show or the third co-host. One of the options.
The possibilities are endless, and we'll discuss this in a later episode. I assure you of that. But if you're watching this on your TV, you can see the full episodes on YouTube, and you can listen to them on Spotify, Apple Music, and Google Podcast. And you can spot the Frontline podcast anytime the battalion do some social media. Check it out. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, you can find us there. So I have to also say a big thank you to Ben Sargent, our intrepid producer, for making us sound as awesome as we do. So he's Kortney Kenny. I'm Tom Parisi, and this was a lot of fun. We're definitely doing it again sometime.